Mr. Minister, what a pleasure to see you in Beijing.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Such a beautiful season.
You have a very busy schedule, I know. Tell me more about your observation of the Chinese economy and your takeaway so far of the trip.
Well, the trip has been extremely productive. First of all, I'm very grateful for the warm welcome and Chinese hospitality. I'm here for the China-Türkiye Intergovernmental Committee meeting. This is the highest level, ministerial level committee that has a very broad coverage of issues. We had a productive meeting with my counterpart. My key takeaway is that China is trying to build a fairer world. While there may be imbalances, but they're open and constructive in addressing those. So that's really one of the key takeaways. The second one is that China is the world's leader in green transition. And we would benefit tremendously from having more dialogue and more investments in renewables, for example. Connectivity is another key issue because, infrastructure is key to prosperity, is key to development. And so harmonizing BRI, China's Belt and Road Initiative, and Turkey's Middle Corridor certainly offers or promises huge upside again in terms of prosperity for both Turkey and China.
You're really setting the tone for our discussion today. A lot of the areas you mentioned, sir, I would love to follow up. First of all, about the green transformation and the imbalance, well, there is discussion. We understand that China protested against the 40% tariffs that Turkey exerted on China-imported electronic vehicles. I understand there were discussions at the WTO and bilaterally now. What is the level of discussion and the degrees of discussion now between the two sides while you are here?
Well, discussions have been amicable. There's a good understanding. We understand, obviously, Chinese concerns about these, additional tariffs on EVs. As you know, EVs are a new industry. China is very strong, and that's not China's fault. China is very competitive. China has great scale, but it's an infant industry in Turkey. We only have one major, producer, and therefore it's really not unusual to see at these early stages some measures to protect at the early stages. But let me give you some broader picture, though, so that there is no misunderstanding. Since the accession to WTO, China's export to the world has gone up by 10-folds. But China's exports to Turkey have gone up by 30-folds. So we've been relatively open and rule-based. But infant industries sometimes do require measures, and this should be taken within that context.
So to what level is the discussion now between you and your Chinese colleagues about this issue?
We are looking forward to some of Chinese EV producers' investments in Turkey.
Yeah. It's already happening, by the way.
It's already happening.
Over the past few years.
Exactly.
While we are speaking, also more is going there.
So we welcome that. And as I said, this is a temporary situation. And I can tell you that my Chinese counterparts have been very constructive, and I'm very grateful for their understanding and for their constructive approach.
About the temporary tariffs, we see that in electronic vehicles. That's one case study. The other can be about the steel industry as well. So there has been debate, whether it's within WTO or globally, about whether tariffs will become an obstacle for trade, not only bilaterally, but also multilaterally, and would, in a way, hurt eventually the multilateral trading system and the trust about global trade?
Well, unfortunately, global trade fragmentation seems a new reality. But it cannot be good for global economy. This trend started post-global financial crisis. I have to say, prior to global financial crisis, if you look at global trade, it was the main engine of growth. Global trade growth used to be 1.5 to 2 times average global growth. Like last year or in recent years, global trade growth has not been even at par with global growth. So we have that engine, meaning one of the main engines of global growth, which is trade, is currently sputtering. Our measures are mostly to do with some of these infant industries, which I think China has a good understanding because, you had gone through similar process in the past. There is a tendency of broader protectionism. So like friendshoring or nearshoring after the pandemic, but friendshoring currently seems like a new trend. And I think it also suggests that post-World War II, rule-based multilateral system is coming under pressure. I don't think that's good for the world. I don't think that China wants that.
Does Turkey?
No, Turkey doesn't want it either. We want to stay open because we believe that trade openness is key to competition is key to productivity and innovation. When you are inward looking, there is no reason to be more productive and innovative. And therefore, we believe that trade openness remains key in the long run to prosperity.
Mr. Minister, you mentioned about connectivity. Belt and Road Initiative has long been this one that has been benefiting many of those countries participating. Meanwhile, the Middle Corridor is key to your region. Both sides have been talking about synergy for quite some time. Can you give us some concrete things that's likely to present a better answer to that discussion of synergy?
Let me give you a few figures. If you were to get a boat to travel from China to London around Africa, it takes 45 days. If you go through Suez Canal, it takes 35 days. But if you use Middle Corridor, it takes 18 days. And all the countries along the route would benefit. Because when you have good railway infrastructure, for example, it helps you decarbonize, it helps your country to become more competitive, which is key to development. We're also now in touch with GCC countries, but also Iraq, to build a network, basically a railway and a highway from Basra port all the way to Turkey, so that there is connectivity all the way to London and all the way to China. When you have such strong connectivity, clearly it's pro-business. Because when you have investments, if you only focus on the local market, it has limited opportunities. But strong connectivity provides more opportunities on a regional basis.
But of course, investment into infrastructure can be huge. What about the so-called payback? We have beautiful infrastructures, but how to make sure it's going to be sustainable?
The way I see it, if countries get it right in terms of prioritization, then I think the return can be earlier. meaning can be faster. So for example, I can tell you one mistake that we did in Turkey. We prioritized road network. We built around 25,000 kilometers of dual carriage highways or motorways. Now we realize that we need to connect major industrial parks or organized industrial zones with the ports. Why? Because it's key to competitiveness, but also now that European Union is talking about carbon tax, clearly we need to reduce our carbon footprint. And the best way is through electrification and railways. So I think getting your priorities right makes a big difference in terms of returns on your investments.
Finally, Mr. Minister, you are very experienced in the field of finance, trade, and economy. I'm sure you have already developed some sense of where China is.
Well, recently I got hold of a book by Qiu Jin. The title is New China Playbook. It helps me have a better understanding of Chinese economy, because the classic Eurocentric or Western-centric perspective is that the Chinese model is not sustainable. The reality is Chinese model has been a great success. China, despite its massive size, accounting for about 17% of global GDP or 19% if you take PPP, purchasing power parity, it's still doing heavy lifting. Around 5% growth means China on its own accounts for almost a third of global growth. So, and I would say the latest stimulus package, the latest measures, fiscal and monetary measures, are appropriate response to some of these challenges. But ultimately, the key to sustainable long-term growth is total factor productivity. Again, China has been very successful there. But I think going forward, what will help lift growth is adoption of AI, artificial intelligence. China is ahead of the curve, and structural reforms. So the way I see things, when I come here, I become much more positive on China's outlook compared to when I read stuff when I'm away.
How interesting, isn't it?
It is, because that's why I think coming here and traveling and seeing firsthand is probably the best way. Because perception and reality, sometimes for some countries, that includes Turkey, I know our reality requires further improvement, but perception tends to be a lot more negative.
Mr. Minister, what a pleasure seeing you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.